Hey everyone, you've made it. This is our last lecture for our dual U.S. history course. This lecture is going to be on the 2000s, and we're going to be looking at how America moved into the new millennium and how America has continued to move into the future. We're looking at major events, cultural aspects, and things that shape us the way we are today. Two role models of the 2000s could be Steve Jobs and Ellen DeGeneres. Steve Jobs is creator of Apple Computer Company, and Apple became one of the most dominant companies in the world after being introduced in the 1980s, but really flourished in the 2000s, in particular with the introduction of the iPod, the iPhone, and the iPad. These personal devices, most of us today have an iPhone. This really changed how the world works. And we look at Jobs as kind of a role model of the technological era. Ellen DeGeneres is a popular talk show host, extremely popular. She's also a lesbian, and kind of defines these new ideas of who can be popular in society. TV really changes in the 2000s. In particular, you have reality TV take off, where before you had shows about real people, now you have entire shows that just follow around real people that have, contests like American Idol, The Voice, or you follow around a family like the Kardashians. And so it kind of blurs the line between reality and TV. But written TV shows change as well. You end up with kind of darker, edgier dramas and comedies. You have more in-depth storytelling. You have storytelling that really looks at bad people and uses them as the main aspects. You have shows like The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, and these are long, drawn-out dramas. And this is really what the start of what's known as like prestige television, and the idea that television is a really important format compared to movies. For comedies, you have shows like Modern Family, which define the idea of a modern American family. Before, remember in the 1950s, we had shows like Leave It to Beaver, white people, two kids. Now you have a multi-ethnic family, different sexual orientations, all living together, and this kind of represents the changing nature of the United States. You have shows like South Park, Family Guy, cartoons that are pushing the envelope, and allowing for more and more controversial topics to be brought up on TV, to be made fun of, to be laughed at. For movies, one of the big changes and shifts you see is that stereotype of the princess being flipped in some movies. So you have movies like Brave or Frozen, where kids' movies where the princess is the young protagonist is the hero. Women are heroes in these stories. So movies like Brave and Frozen. So that's really a transition from what we saw earlier in American history to where now women are the heroes. They stand up for themselves. They save the day. In the 2000s, you have the growth of major franchise movies. You have these large, epic, world-building blockbusters. People go to the movies to escape everyday reality. So you have movies like Star Wars, the Marvel movies coming out. So again, these are big blockbuster movies with a lot of actors set in kind of different worlds, and these become the dominant force at the box office in the 2000s. Some of the bigger musical acts of the 2000s are Justin Timberlake and Rihanna. The thing is, these musicians kind of blend a lot of genres. Before we saw rock and roll, you see hip hop. These are combining rock and roll, hip hop, R&B elements, and these are some of the more popular musicians of the time. You have musicians such as Drake, who really combines a lot of different forms. He's a singer, he's a rapper, so he's combining R&B, he's combining hip hop. You have people like Miley Cyrus, who are gaining popularity by kind of pushing the envelopes. Remember Elvis pushing the envelope? Miley Cyrus takes that to a whole nother level with her music videos, her performances, and kind of gains popularity through that. So these are important figures of this era. Possibly the most significant aspect of the 2000s is the creation of social media. That is, internet sites that allow people to share content, talk directly to each other, and pass ideas back and forth. So in the mid 2000s, you see the creation of Facebook, Twitter, and these companies that really define the world now. People are allowed to be their own publishers. They're allowed to put content out on the internet. They're allowed to consume content from other people throughout the world. And this really changes a lot of ways that humans interact, and it shrinks the world, but it also creates other problems. So again, you see the growth of companies, Facebook, Instagram, Spotify. You have Wi-Fi in areas. So people are now really connected to other people throughout the world, which in a lot of ways is a great thing, but it also creates division. People are able to publish whatever they want, read whatever they want, kind of create their own bubbles. And this has created a lot of division in America and throughout the world. So social media is a huge aspect of the 2000s. Video games become more in depth, become more detailed, and become more engaging in this era. They move online to where you can play against other people, and they become some of the biggest forms of entertainment. Grand Theft Auto 5 is one of the highest grossing pieces of entertainment in human history. And so people become really engaged in video games, playing against other people, playing against themselves, and this becomes a kind of a lifestyle in a lot of ways. Not only are TV shows changing with reality TV, new content, you are also seeing new ways to watch TV. The internet is expanding. We're getting more on-demand products. So you have, satellite TV. You have on-demand where you can pick out if you want to watch something. You can record a show and go back and watch it later. You no longer have to look at the TV guide or something and say, this is coming on at 6 o'clock tonight. We have to watch it. You can either record it, go back later, or watch it. And then you also have the introduction of services such as Netflix, these streaming services that have content that you can watch whenever you want. So this is really changing entertainment throughout the world, but particularly in the United States where a lot of this starts. People are getting what they want immediately. It is no longer waiting like you once had to. The computer is now seen as something that every person has, every person can have, every person should have. Before, you might have a personal computer in your house that your family shared. Now it's seen that everyone has their own computer or device. Most people have a computer in their pocket with a smartphone all the time, whether it's in their pocket, by their bedside table at night. People are always connected to computers. And the idea is that a computer for every person. You have the introduction of high definition televisions that are even getting better. So before you had just standard television, now you can see greater details. You have more programming. People are way more engaged with their TVs. And also, again, as I mentioned last slide, you have cell phones. Cell phones are basically no longer phones. They're mini computers. And so we are always connected. You're connected to social media apps. You're connected to other people. But we have a lot of technology to keep us engaged, keep us connected in this era. The space program makes significant strides in the 2000s. In 2011, NASA launches 2 rovers to Mars, which are still working, still observing the Martian surface. So we have robots working on other planets. So you can really see the significance of NASA trying to spread out the idea that we are still exploring space, still expanding technology in space. This technology expands into medical technology. We have better hip replacement surgeries. We have ways of embedding computers into people to monitor insulin. So you can monitor diabetics, can monitor insulin on their cell phones. So technology is improving a lot of different areas of life into the 2000s and becoming more and more ubiquitous. It is everywhere in life. So let's think about what this means for you. What does it mean that all these things are happening in the 2000s, happening in the era that we live in? Well, for one thing, it's completely changed the way we shop. Before, you had to leave your house, go to a retail store, maybe a department store to buy something. Now you can look for it online on one of the massive sites such as Amazon. And someone will deliver that product straight to your home. This seems like something that is going to continue to grow in the upcoming years. This is something we've learned about a lot recently, but education is increasingly moving online. Telecommunication is increasingly important. You are always plugged in. Therefore, you are always expected to be available to work, to do something. So this is a huge change. This probably will continue to change. We will probably see more and more work online, more education occurring online as people move more into their computers and into their devices. Jobs are changing. Jobs throughout the country are changing drastically. So computers, computer programming, controlling computer hardware and software is a huge job now. Different jobs are enabled by satellite systems, and particularly global positioning systems. We all have smartphones. We all have a GPS, a map in our phone. These have allowed companies such as Uber to grow, ways that taxis are used. So there's new job opportunities. And then telecommunications, smartphones and internet-based businesses are growing. If your business does not use the internet, it's not going to work in the 2000s and in the future. So you see these new jobs growing because of all this technology. But all this can have an effect on privacy, on our definition of privacy. So really the increase of technology, the increase of computers, the increase of internet, social media, all these things I've been talking about have led to a change in the definition of privacy. Finances, pictures, and personal lives are now all online. For people born today, their entire lives are documented online. Their parents might post pictures of them when they're born. And this gets expected to keep going for the rest of their lives. So you could really follow. You do all your banking online. You put everything online. So it really changes the idea of privacy. And you have horrible things like this where the Steubenville rapists, these two boys posted a video sexually assaulting a girl on YouTube. You have cases like this where people are convicted because of these things, because they're putting these horrible things on the internet. So this is one of the downsides, one of the changing ideas with all the technology. Another result of all this technology and all this connectedness is that we live in a never-ending news cycle. There is now 24 hours of news always available, whether it's on cable, whether it's on the internet, social media. News travels incredibly fast these days. Has negative and positive consequences, but it means that we are always consumed by news, and this could be leading to further divisions within our society. The 2000s saw a great growth and could see a continued growth in the global economy. The world is really more connected than it has ever been. This is the result of offshoring and outsourcing. Offshoring is basically moving parts of the economy out of the United States into other places. Outsourcing is basically giving up aspects of the economy and buying it from other places. So you see a lot of things made in China, seen things made throughout the world. And this is part of a global economy we have now. With all the technology, cybersecurity has become a huge aspect of our everyday lives. Hackers and cyber terrorists, people try to steal information from you online. Again, your finances are online, your pictures are online, all these things. Governments rely on the internet now. Governments rely on technology. So cybersecurity is incredibly important now. Relationships have changed because of social media, because of the internet, because of all the technology we have. We have romantic relationships that start online with dating websites. We have friendships that are online. People talk online, communicate online. So you have, online relationships growing ways that we never could have imagined before we had all this technology, before we had social media. We've seen the growth of culture wars in this country. We have seen the country become incredibly divided along cultural lines, along political lines, along ideological lines. So you have red states versus blue states. We have people who represent traditional American values, people like the Duck Dynasty people, religion, America, the old kind of values that we used to have, like traditional conservative values. And then people like Ellen DeGeneres, who's a lesbian, who's incredibly popular, represents kind of a new way of thinking, represents more blue states. So these culture wars have come to define America more and more. You see culture wars in our politics. You see more radical politicians pushing more radical agendas because they have the support of people on the internet. They have people fired up. So you have people like Ted Cruz with the support of the Tea Party, someone like Bernie Sanders who considers himself a democratic socialist. They represent pretty extreme versions of their parties, but they've become more and more popular because of these culture wars. One of the areas where you see these culture wars fought are in the legalization of marijuana. Several states have legalized marijuana over the last 10 years, have legalized it for medicinal purposes, and states have legalized it for recreational purposes. Yet marijuana remains an illegal drug on the federal level. So you see kind of the clash between different states, the federal government, over the issue of legalization of marijuana. Transgender and same-sex marriage are large issues in this culture war. People who have traditional conservative values think that marriage should be between a man and a woman. However, the Supreme Court has ruled differently, and there is same-sex marriage allowed in the United States. But there's still been pushback against this from certain groups and other groups who really promote this. So this is one of the ways that the culture wars has spilled over into larger society. In particular, with the election of Donald Trump, immigration is one of the most important and hot topics of the 2000s, and part of these culture wars. So the idea of, should we build a wall, keep all the immigrants out, or offer a path to citizenship? This has become increasingly a divide between blue states and red states, between conservatives and liberals. You could look at comedies as a difference in our culture wars. You have a traditional comedy like the Andy Griffith Show, black and white, traditional values. Then you have a show like South Park, which makes fun of everything, which there is nothing holy. They will make fun of any topic, take it as far as they want. And so this kind of represents a different things. Should you have certain values? Should you worry about what you say? Or should you say whatever you want? Should you live however you want? Let's look at a couple significant issues that the Supreme Court decided in the 2000s. In the case of Riley versus California, the Supreme Court ruled that you have a right to privacy. That is, that digital information on cell phones is private. That means the police cannot get your cell phone and search it. That is your information. Then in the case of Arizona versus Intertribal Council of Arizona, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of equal rights, so that proof of citizenship is not required to register as a voter. That is, that you could register as a voter as someone who lives in the country. You do not have to prove that you are a citizen of the United States. In the case of Snyder versus Phelps, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the rule of law. They stated that protests of public concern are entitled to greater protection under the free speech clause of the First Amendment. So that is, when people protest on a hot button issue, on something that is about public policy, that they have greater entitlement under the First Amendment. That is, they have a freedom of speech as defined in the First Amendment. Then you have the case of Obergefell versus Hodges, and this, the Supreme Court favored in equal rights. This was the case that legalized same-sex marriage in the United States. So let's take a look at the presidents of the 2000s. In 2000, George W. Bush was elected President of the United States. He served 2 terms until 2008. Bush was president during the September 11th attacks in 2001, and this greatly changed his presidency and the history of the country. He led the war against terrorism. That is, after 9/11, the United States invaded Afghanistan, and we are still at war in Afghanistan. Bush also expanded the war against terrorism to expand war in Iraq, which there's still troops in Iraq. Under Bush, the Patriot Act was passed, which expanded programs of surveillance, created the Department of Homeland Security, and that was to prevent future terrorist attacks. He also created the Transportation Safety Administration, or TSA, which you see at airports, railway stations, places like that, to try to prevent future terrorist attacks. So you really see Bush's presidency being defined by the September 11th attacks and the response to those attacks. Bush also pushed through a huge education initiative known as No Child Left Behind Act. This created federal guidelines that states had to follow in order to receive funding. Bush and his administration cut taxes, and this led to economic growth until there was a housing crisis in 2007, and this led to the Great Recession in 2008, 2009. So Bush's presidency in a lot of ways is seen as a failure because of the non-ending wars and his presidency ending during the Great Recession. Barack Obama was elected in 2008 and served 2 terms until 2016. Obama was the first African American president, and he was a Democrat after Bush's Republican administration. And so under Obama, significant events were the assassination of Osama bin Laden, who in 2011 was finally found in Pakistan and killed. He had been the mastermind behind the September 11th attacks. Obama saw a withdrawal of troops from Iraq. He saw an increase of drone strikes in fighting the war on terror. So Obama does not end that war on terror that Bush was fighting, but rather changes some of the tactics. And also, under Obama's presidency, there were the Boston Marathon bombings, which were another terrorist attack on the United States. And so, again, you still see the problem of terrorism. You still see Obama fighting the war on terrorism. Some significant legislative acts, executive acts under Obama were the economic stimulus. This was passed in the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act in 2009. What this did was give money to banks to try to pay back their troubled assets as part of the housing crisis, and this was try to stop the Great Recession from becoming a depression. The Job Creation Act was passed in 2010. This was another reaction to the Great Recession. And then one of the largest things that was passed in Obama was the Affordable Care Act in 2010, or otherwise known as Obamacare. This was a nationwide health insurance plan that required people to have health insurance and was a way of trying to fix problems in the health insurance industry. And in a lot of ways, it's been seen as a failure in certain ways and is still debated over today. In 2016, Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton to become the 45th president of the United States. Trump was a political outsider who had never served office before becoming president. He'd formerly been a reality TV show host and a New York City real estate developer. Trump ran on an anti-immigration, anti-establishment platform. Trump basically ran on the idea of change. He was a Republican candidate who ran on the idea of cutting taxes for people. He ran on the idea of building a wall with Mexico to stop immigration. And in office, he tried to enforce tax cuts, which he did, and enforce immigration acts. He built a platform of America First, putting America first in foreign policy and cutting ties with several key allies. He also led a series of trade wars, leading to increased tariffs with countries such as China and countries in Europe. Trump also was president when the COVID-19 pandemic began and was criticized for his handling of the pandemic. Probably the most controversial aspect of Trump's presidency was his inability to commit to a peaceful transfer of power. Even before the 2020 election, Trump claimed that he might not accept the results if he didn't like them. When Trump lost the election in 2020, he claimed election fraud. He claimed a variety of reasons for that the election had been stolen from him, that he had not lost fair. Courts failed to find any significant evidence of election fraud. However, that did not stop Trump from promoting these ideas. On January 6, 2021, supporters of Donald Trump stormed the Capitol in an attempt to prevent the certification of the Electoral College votes for Joe Biden. This is a dark moment in American history, as this was one of the first times that a peaceful transfer of power almost did not take place. However, Joe Biden was inaugurated as the 46th president of the United States in 2021 and is the current president of the United States. Biden oversaw part of the COVID-19 pandemic relief, also oversaw massive inflation that resulted in aspects of the COVID-19 pandemic. He controversially withdrew troops, ending the war in Afghanistan. He also saw the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, which sought to end inflation and promote green energy throughout the United States. One of the things that has continued to mark Biden's presidency is his continued fighting with Donald Trump, and the prospect of a rematch between Trump and Biden in 2024 is on the horizon. So I'll finish up our last lecture by thinking about the future of America. We are all living in history. Nothing defines that more than the current COVID-19 pandemic we are living through. We are aware that things are changing, that this country is changing, and that these will have significant lasting impacts. So what we have to think about is, will the American dream continue to live on? Will people be able to make a life, come here, build up, move into the middle class, live safely? Will America continue to be the most powerful country in the world? Will this country unite or continue to divide along these culture wars, along conservatives and liberals? And what will our country look like to future historians? What will be the major events that historians will look back and write about when they look at our era? So we are living through history. Never forget that.